I had always thought of my life as perfect. At 38 years old, I was a successful forensic expert working in Denver, Colorado. My wife, Olivia, and I had been married for 7 wonderful years. Olivia was a high school English teacher, passionate about her students and her job. We were happy together, or at least that's how it seemed. Our lives were busy, no doubt. Both of us had demanding careers, and we often worked long hours. But we made it a point to spend quality time together whenever we could. Our weekends were sacred, time to relax, explore, and enjoy each other's company. We'd go on hikes, catch a movie, or sometimes just sit together with a cup of coffee, talking about life. Life felt good. Life felt normal. But over the last few months, things had begun to shift, almost imperceptibly at first. I noticed Olivia was coming home later and later. It wasn't anything obvious at first. I told myself it was just the stress of her job, that maybe her students were keeping her after school for extra help. She would come home, tired but with a smile, tell me about her day, and then we'd have dinner together, just like we always did. But I noticed the small things, the little changes that I couldn't explain. She started to work longer hours, even when there was no reason for it. She'd tell me she was staying late at school for a meeting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't adding up. The late nights, the sudden disappearances, the vague excuses. It wasn't like Olivia to be secretive. She had always been open with me, sharing everything, from the smallest details of her day to her deepest thoughts. But now, there was a distance I couldn't ignore. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Just stress, or maybe she was just caught up in work. I didn't want to believe it was anything more. After all, we were married. We had a life built together. Why would she suddenly change? I tried to push the thoughts aside. But as the weeks went on, the feeling in my gut started to grow stronger. Something was off. I told myself I was being paranoid. Everyone goes through phases, right? Maybe it was just a tough time at work for Olivia. She'd always been dedicated to her job, and I respected that. But the longer it went on, the more my mind started to wander. I had to admit it to myself, something wasn't right. It wasn't until one cold night in early December that everything began to unravel. I had attended a forensic conference that day and decided to head home early, hoping to surprise Olivia. I thought we could have a quiet evening together, maybe catch up on the shows we like to watch, or go out for dinner. When I walked into the house, the lights were on, but there was no sign of Olivia. It was strange. She'd usually be in the living room by now, maybe reading or preparing dinner. I checked the kitchen, the living room, and even the bedroom, but she wasn't there. It was only then that I heard the faint sound of her voice from upstairs. She was getting ready to go out. "Olivia!" I called out, walking up the stairs. She was standing in front of the mirror, brushing her hair. She turned to me with a surprised smile. "Oh, hey, David. I'm just heading out to meet an old friend. It's been a while, you know." I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. I had never heard of this old friend before, and it struck me as odd that she was leaving without much of an explanation. But I didn't say anything at first. I wanted to believe her. "Okay," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What time will you be back?" "Not sure," she replied. "It might be a while. But don't worry, I'll be fine." The casualness of her words didn't sit right with me. Why was she being so vague? Why didn't she mention any specifics? I told myself it was nothing, but the feeling in my gut told me otherwise. It was a strange instinct, a nagging thought in the back of my mind. Something wasn't adding up. I watched her grab her coat and head toward the door. She didn't kiss me goodbye, didn't even offer a reassuring smile. She just left. As she stepped out the door, I felt a strange sense of dread wash over me. I had always trusted Olivia. But tonight, something felt off. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door she had just walked through. Then I made a decision, one I wasn't proud of but couldn't ignore. I had to know where she was going. We had activated a location tracking app a while ago, just as a safety precaution. It seemed harmless at the time. We both agreed it would give us peace of mind in case anything happened, especially when we were working late. But now, in the quiet of the evening, with the sense that something was terribly wrong, I pulled out my phone and opened the app. I typed in Olivia's name, and my heart sank as I saw her location appear on the screen. She wasn't where she said she was going to be. According to the app, she was at a house in the outskirts of the city, far from the coffee shop or friend's house she had claimed to be visiting. My hands trembled as I stared at the map. I couldn't believe it. I felt a mix of confusion, disbelief, and a rising sense of betrayal. Why had she lied to me? What was she doing there? I didn't think, I just acted. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door, my mind racing with questions I couldn't answer. I drove through the cold streets, my heart pounding in my chest. The address led me to a quiet suburban neighborhood. The house was modest, nothing special. But there was one thing that struck me immediately: the car parked outside. It was Olivia's. I parked across the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. I could feel my heart in my throat, the pounding of my pulse drowning out every other thought. This was the moment. This was where everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my life, was about to shatter. With a deep breath, I stepped out of the car. I didn't know what I would find. But I had to know the truth. I walked toward the door of the house, my mind swirling with dread and disbelief. Then I knocked. The door opened, and standing in front of me was Ryan, a colleague of Olivia's from school. He looked surprised, his eyes widening as he saw me standing there. Behind him, I saw Olivia. She was standing by the stairs, her face pale, her eyes filled with fear and guilt. I could barely get the words out. "So this is what you've been doing." She opened her mouth, as if to explain, but I couldn't listen. I didn't want to hear any excuses. My heart was breaking, and the only thing I could think about was how everything I had believed in had been a lie. I turned and walked away, not sparing her another glance. My mind was numb. My chest felt like it was caving in. I didn't know what would happen next, but I knew one thing for sure: my life had just changed forever. The drive back home felt like a blur. I don't remember much of it, just the cold night air, the streetlights flashing by, and the deafening silence in my car. My mind raced, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Olivia, the woman I'd spent 7 years of my life with, had been lying to me. And not just lying, betraying me. I kept thinking about the look on her face when I knocked on that door. The shock in her eyes, the way she froze when she saw me. And Ryan, her colleague, why was he there? What did they have to do with each other? My heart twisted at the thought. Were they having an affair? Had this been going on for months? I couldn't make sense of it. I pulled into the driveway and sat there for a moment, staring at our house. Our home. The place where we had shared so many memories. The place that now felt so foreign, so hollow. I knew Olivia would be back soon. She couldn't have gone far. The truth was, I didn't want to face her. I didn't want to hear her excuses or try to understand why. Everything inside me screamed to get away, to leave, to escape the hurt that was clawing at me from the inside. But I stayed. I had to face her. I had to know what she had to say, even though part of me already knew. When she walked through the front door later that night, I could see the hesitation in her step. She didn't know what to say, how to begin. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence hung heavy in the air between us, suffocating any words that could have been said. I didn't know where to start. I had so many questions, so many things I needed to ask. But I didn't trust myself to speak. Every word that had come to my mind on the drive home seemed pointless now. The truth had already been laid bare, and nothing she could say would change that. "David," she finally whispered, her voice trembling. I didn't let her finish. I couldn't. My anger, my disappointment, my heartbreak, everything came rushing out in a flood of words I could barely control. Don't try to explain yourself," I snapped, my voice rough. "I saw everything. I know what you've been doing. Don't you dare lie to me anymore." Her face twisted in anguish, but I didn't care. The hurt in her eyes only mirrored the pain that was eating me alive. "David, please," she said, taking a step toward me. "It's not what you think." "Not what I think." I interrupted, my voice rising. "I saw you there, Olivia. I saw you with him. Don't tell me it's not what I think. You've been lying to me for months. I trusted you." My voice cracked on the last sentence, and I hated myself for it. I hated that after everything, after all the years of love and trust, I was standing here, broken and betrayed. She stood there, frozen, unsure of what to say. Her lips trembled as she tried to form words, but I could see the guilt in her eyes, the shame. She didn't even try to defend herself. She knew I had seen the truth. I never meant for it to happen, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I never wanted to hurt you. I swear, David, But I couldn't listen anymore. Her words were empty to me now. Nothing she could say would undo what had already been done. How long, Olivia? How long have you been lying to me? Her shoulders sagged as she closed her eyes, and I knew then that the answer was something I didn't want to hear. A few months, she admitted softly, her voice breaking. It started with late meetings at school. Ryan was just a friend at first, someone to talk to. But things got complicated. Complicated. I repeated bitterly. That's what you're calling it? You've been sleeping with him, haven't you? Don't lie to me. She flinched, and that was all the answer I needed. I felt sick to my stomach. My heart felt like it was tearing in two. The woman I had loved, the woman I had trusted, had been deceiving me for months. And I had been blind to it. The thought was unbearable. I'm sorry, David, Olivia whispered, her voice full of regret. I never wanted to hurt you. I was lonely. You were always so busy, and I made a mistake. A huge mistake. A mistake. She called it a mistake. As if a few months of lies and betrayal could be chalked up to just a mistake. The rage that boiled inside me threatened to consume me, but I pushed it down, burying it deep beneath the hurt. I looked at her one last time. Her face was streaked with tears, her body trembling. But I didn't care. I couldn't care anymore. The love I had felt for her seemed so far away now, lost in a sea of anger and betrayal. Without saying another word, I turned and walked out of the room, unable to be in the same space as her any longer. I didn't know where I was going, only that I needed to get away. I needed to think, to clear my mind, to breathe without feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me. I grabbed my coat, slammed the door behind me, and stepped into the cold night. I didn't look back. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away, away from the house, away from her, away from the suffocating weight of betrayal. The cold December air bit at my skin as I walked aimlessly through the streets of Denver. The lights of the city blurred in my vision, and my mind raced with questions that had no answers. How could she do this to me? How had I been so blind? The pain in my chest was unbearable, a sharp, twisting ache that wouldn't go away. Every thought, every memory I had of Olivia now felt tainted. The quiet dinners we shared, the trips we took together, the late-night talks, everything had been a lie. I couldn't trust anything anymore. I ended up at a small park, the same one Olivia and I used to visit when we first started dating. I sat down on one of the benches, my hands trembling. I couldn't stop thinking about her. I had always loved her so much, trusted her completely. I never once imagined that she could betray me like this. I pulled out my phone and looked at the screen. The location app was still open, showing the house where I had confronted her. Ryan's house. My stomach churned again as I thought about it. How long had this been going on? Was she in love with him? Or was it just a fling, a moment of weakness? I couldn't wrap my mind around it. I sat there for what felt like hours, the cold creeping into my bones, my mind spinning in endless circles. At some point, I stood up, not even sure why. My body moved on autopilot, dragging me back to the house. I had to face it, face her. I couldn't just run away from this. But part of me didn't want to go back. Part of me wanted to keep walking, to leave everything behind and never look back. But I couldn't. I had built a life with Olivia. I had loved her with everything I had, and now in the aftermath of her betrayal, I felt like I had lost a piece of myself. When I returned home, the house was quiet, too quiet. The front door was ajar, and I hesitated before stepping inside. Olivia wasn't in the living room. I walked through the hallway and into the kitchen, but there was no sign of her. I felt an odd sense of relief. She wasn't here. Maybe she had gone to stay with someone else, or maybe she was just giving me space. I was relieved, but it also left me with a strange emptiness. I didn't want to face her, not right now. I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again. But then again, what choice did I have? I couldn't keep running forever. I had to confront her. As I stood there, staring at the empty kitchen, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I froze. I knew it was her before I even looked at the screen. Olivia, David, I'm sorry. Please let's talk. I didn't respond immediately. My fingers hovered over the screen as I thought about what to say. What could I possibly say to her? There were no more words left between us. I had already heard the lies, the excuses. I had seen the truth with my own eyes. But still, a small part of me, the part that had loved her for so long, wanted to believe there was an explanation, a way to fix this. But I knew that wasn't possible. I typed a response, my fingers shaking as I did. David, I don't think there's anything left to talk about. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. Almost immediately, my phone buzzed again. Olivia, please, David. I need you to understand. I never meant to hurt you. I let out a bitter laugh, a sound that didn't even feel like mine. Understand. How was I supposed to understand any of this? I had been nothing but loyal, nothing but patient. I had been there for her in ways I couldn't even explain. And this was how she repaid me? I stood in the kitchen, staring at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. There were a million things I wanted to say, but I didn't. I couldn't. There was no point. The moment she lied to me about where she was, the moment I saw her with Ryan, it was over. I sent one last message. David, I need some time. I'll be staying somewhere else for a while. The silence that followed was deafening. My thumb hovered over the screen, waiting for a reply, but none came. I set the phone down on the kitchen counter, walked out the back door, and into the cold night once again. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away from everything. I needed to clear my head. So much had changed in such a short amount of time. My marriage, my life. Nothing felt real anymore. I was living in some twisted version of reality where everything I knew had been turned upside down. I found a small hotel on the outskirts of town. It wasn't anything special, but it was quiet. I checked in under a false name, not wanting to be recognized. I didn't want anyone to know where I was, especially Olivia. When I got to the room, I collapsed onto the bed, burying my face in the pillow. I wanted to cry. I wanted to scream. I wanted to do anything to release the storm that was raging inside me. But I couldn't. The tears wouldn't come. It was like I had cried all the tears I had left when I saw Olivia's face tonight. Now, all I had was numbness. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, lost in the emptiness. I had to figure out what to do next. I couldn't keep living like this. I couldn't go back to that life, to that house with her. It was over. But a part of me, maybe the smallest foolish part, wanted to believe that we could somehow fix this, that everything could go back to normal. But deep down, I knew it wasn't possible. There was no going back. The trust was gone. The love was gone. And all I had left was the broken pieces of a life I couldn't put back together. The days that followed felt like a blur, a haze of anger, regret, and confusion that I couldn't shake. I stayed in the small hotel for a week, not really doing anything. I spent most of my time in that sterile room, staring at the walls, lost in my thoughts. I had nowhere to go, no one to talk to. The life I had built with Olivia was gone, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. I didn't speak to her after that night. She tried calling a few times, but I ignored her messages. I couldn't bring myself to listen to her plead for forgiveness. I didn't want to hear the pain in her voice, the way she told me she was sorry. It wasn't enough. It could never be enough. The betrayal was too deep, too raw. I couldn't unsee the way she looked at Ryan. I couldn't forget the way she lied to me for months, and the way she stood there that night, guilty and helpless, with no real explanation. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to feel everything, the hurt, the betrayal, the anger. I let myself sit in the pain, not trying to numb it or distract myself. I needed to process it. I needed to feel it, no matter how much it hurt. Because that was the only way I could move on. I didn't reach out to friends or family. It wasn't because I didn't want to talk to them, it was because I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to people that your wife has been having an affair? How do you admit that you've failed so completely? I wasn't ready for that conversation. Not yet. After a week of wallowing in the hotel, I decided to go back to my apartment. I couldn't stay in the hotel forever. I needed to face reality. I needed to rebuild my life, even if I didn't know how. The apartment felt small and lonely when I walked in. The silence was overwhelming. It had been our place, Olivia's and mine. It smelled like her, Like the lavender-scented candles she used to burn in the living room, like the perfume she always wore. Every corner of the apartment seemed to echo with memories of the life we had shared. I had packed some of my things from the house when I left, but I hadn't wanted to take too much. I didn't want reminders of her, not yet. So I sat in the apartment, looking at the sparse furniture, trying to convince myself that this was the next chapter. The old chapter was over. There was no going back. The first few days in the apartment were the hardest. I had to learn how to live alone again, how to be independent in a way I hadn't been in years. I threw myself into my work, focusing on the details of my forensic cases, trying to distract myself from the empty space in my heart. But it didn't work. The emptiness was still there, no matter how much I tried to fill it with work, with routines, with the noise of the world outside. There was still a part of me that missed Olivia, that longed for the woman I thought she had been. I wasn't ready to let go of that hope yet, but I knew I had to. The person she had become was not the person I married. The trust that had once been the foundation of our relationship was shattered beyond repair. And as much as it hurt, I knew I couldn't hold on to the past anymore. It took time, but I eventually came to terms with the fact that the life I had dreamed of with Olivia was over. The love I had given her had been genuine, but she had chosen a different path. And while I couldn't change that, I could change the way I reacted. I could choose to move forward, to heal, and to rebuild my life, piece by piece. As the months passed, things began to change. Slowly, but surely, I started to feel a sense of peace. I wasn't looking for happiness in the same way I had before. I wasn't trying to replace the loss I felt. Instead, I was learning to live with it, to carry it with me as a part of who I was, but not the whole of me. I started doing things I hadn't done in years. Things I had put on hold while I was focused on my marriage. I took long hikes in the mountains, just to clear my mind and reconnect with myself. I picked up hobbies I had abandoned, like reading books for pleasure instead of just for work. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was living for myself, not for someone else. One evening, as I was sitting in my small apartment, sipping on a cup of coffee, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not like I had been in those first weeks after everything fell apart. The anger had faded, replaced by something else. Something calmer. I had forgiven myself, even if I couldn't forgive Olivia yet. I wasn't going to carry the weight of that betrayal forever. I had learned that letting go was the only way forward. I still thought about Olivia from time to time, of course. She had been a huge part of my life. But the memories of us no longer hurt as much. They were just that, memories. They didn't define me anymore. I had learned that happiness doesn't depend on someone else's actions. It doesn't rely on anyone but yourself. In time, I moved forward. I started to reconnect with old friends, people I hadn't seen in years. I found new connections, people who brought positivity and light into my life. I didn't need to forget the past to move on. I just had to accept it for what it was, and let it go. I had spent years of my life trusting someone else, believing in a future that no longer existed. But now, I had a new kind of peace. A peace that came from knowing I was enough on my own. I didn't need anyone else to complete me. I was learning to be whole again. And while I wasn't sure what the future held, I knew one thing for certain: I was no longer defined by my past. I was moving forward, step by step, into a life I was learning to embrace on my own terms.